Very warm welcome to another live Action for Happiness event. I'm Mark Williamson, and it's fabulous to see hundreds of you joining from all around the world for this really exciting session to kick off a new year. And I'm really excited to be exploring not only this topic about movement and how that links to our happiness, but also to be joined by Hannah Beecham and Dr Brendon Stubbs. Hannah and Brendon, lovely to have you both with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
So pleased to be here. Really looking forward to the conversation.
As you can both see, we've got this fabulous global community with us. Thank you everyone who's here and already sharing welcoming thoughts on the chat. As always, let's keep it kind and relevant and supportive in the conversations we have. And as well as learning from Hannah and Brendon in today's session, we're also going to have a chance to try out some interactive things together. And you can also post some questions for them in the Q&A. So please do use that function. But why don't we start with some introductions? This session's called Move More, Feel Good. It's all about movement and happiness and well-being and mental health and how all of these things connect. But it'd be really helpful, I think, to be introduced to you both. So Hannah, I'd love to hear a bit more about your background. And you founded this amazing Red January campaign that we're delighted to be supporting this year. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about your story and also what that is.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I founded Red January 8 years ago. So we're in our 8th year of the campaign. And I was inspired by witnessing the incredible impact that regular physical activity had on my mum's mental well-being. So my mum experiences depression. And what I was experiencing is that my mum's depressive symptoms were definitely worsening in the wintertime. And 8 years ago, there wasn't really anything out there, especially in the winter, that was giving us a positive intention of moving. And actually, there's so much evidence, especially in the UK, that shows that as a nation, we're much less active. We experience lower mood, lower energy levels. And so it just got me thinking about what I could put out in the world to support my mum and all of us to move. But not only that, to come together with an incredibly supportive community as well. So as I said, Red January has been running for 8 years. And the idea really is to encourage people to move every day or more regularly in January to support their mental well-being. It can be any form of activity. So we've seen thousands of people up and down the country enjoying walking, cycling, running. There's a lot of cold water swimmers out there as well at the moment. I'm not one of them, but there's a lot out there. It can be any form of activity, and it's brilliant to see the creative ways that people get involved with the campaign.
Absolutely. I find it really inspiring, and I'm trying to get involved and move every day. My main movement, as many know, is cycling, but I've been walking, and I haven't been cold water swimming, although my wife, Kate, absolutely loves that as well. Great to hear. Thank you, Hannah. And Brendon, you obviously have a scientific background. I understand some of the research behind this topic. Do you want to say a bit about your own experience and also maybe how the science in this area has moved on? Because I feel as though there's been a real step change in the level of understanding about these connections.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, my background and how I got here was really, I'm a physiotherapist, and physiotherapists traditionally work in physical environments. And as we know, we can't separate the mind and the body. And I just really witnessed early on the powerful benefits of movement for people who are struggling with their mental health or were being treated for a mental illness. So I've been working with people with various mental illness diagnoses for 20 years clinically plus, and seen some amazing transformations as an add-on treatment or as a treatment for people within an overall package, for people with schizophrenia, depression, PTSD, you name it. So I've been really involved in the clinical application of the application. And and also on a personal level, as I've noticed massively the mental well-being benefits for me. And there's been times when I've really needed to incorporate movement in my life, because if I don't, I get, really not in a great space. So I've massively benefited from this too. And movement really is to be enjoyed, and the science has massively changed. So when I sort of first started working in this field in terms of credibility, people were really skeptical about, isn't this a bit wishy-washy, that movement could really, be something which could help you feel happy, healthy, and more positive, and, even possibly reduce the risk of mental health symptoms or improve mental health symptoms. And, we may explore this, but the scientific acceleration and robustness has been exponential, and that's due to the diligent hard work of many people, all over the world. And hopefully I can do those people justice by sharing some of the science today, but the science is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So delighted to be here and share some of those facts.
Yeah, wonderful. What a fantastic combination you both are in terms of reaching lots of people, but also backing it up with all the evidence as well. Why don't we just dive into that a bit more with this idea of the connection between movement, physical activity, and then our sort of overall mental well-being? I guess for many years, we've all known that being physically active is good for our bodies. I think what you're saying, Brendon, is it's also great for our minds and sort of mental state. And to some extent, I wonder if it's great for our soul and our kind of emotional experience and sort of mindset as well. And I guess one of the things on my mind here is well, first of all, the extent to which we're aware of that, but also that there were different dimensions at play here. So some of that's to do with the chemicals, I guess, like the endorphins, but I guess some of it's also to do with the great things that Red January does, like connecting people with each other, getting out into nature. Brendon, first of all, do you want to say a bit about why some of these benefits exist, do you think?
Yeah, so I just think first to point out is there's really strong evidence now proving what you've just known for a long time, and you illustrated movement is good for our mental health. That's been shown in a really robust way, and really the science to understand exactly why is growing and emerging. You may get a less conservative researcher than me who would give you all sorts of definitive answers, but I tend to be a bit cautious and boring in my approach, really. But really the benefits are multifactorial, because movement is has a multi-system effect on our body. We're moving beings, and as soon as we start to move, we get oxygen moving around our body, and areas in our brain immediately start to light up. We get changes in our respiration. So the reasons why it makes us feel better, if we could simplify this, and all of this is ultra simplified and we've got much more to learn. We look at some of the brain changes. So we see new connections and new lighting up within key areas of the brain that help with emotional processing. We see the release of brain growth factors such as brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We see changes in our blood and other factors that can influence our brain and how we feel, and reward processes such as the release of dopamine, and various other chemicals that we could go into, but they're not really that interesting, generally, and then it's just sort of a scientific purist like me. And then there's all these psychosocial elements, which you alluded to, and that's why Red January is so great, in terms of, you feel a sense of purpose, a sense of community, a sense of an ongoing mission that you're contributing towards. And all of these wrap up to just make us feel good. We've got these neurobiological changes. We've got real world changes happening within our brains. We're connecting often with nature, with other people, and that sort of touches on the sort of spiritual, inner sort of soul component, which you referred to. And then we just feel good if we go out for like a walk, or, the other day I was having a bit of a bad dance in the shower and I wasn't feeling particularly great, and all of a sudden I had some music on and I felt better for doing that. So it's just doing something can help us just really feel a lot better.
That's a lovely example, Brendon, thanks. And Hannah, you must have seen lots of these human stories, partly on the point of connecting people together, as Brendon's just said, but also just in terms of people's own personal transformations. You mentioned your mum earlier, but I'm sure you've seen others. Do you want to share a little bit of what you see in the community from getting more moving?
Absolutely. There are so many stories. How long have we got? But the ones I can definitely share with you, I was sharing earlier actually, is very much rooted around the teams that are coming together quite naturally through Red January year on year. So we hear so many stories from families and workplaces and groups of friends that have decided to buddy up. And actually what comes out of that is so much more than the kind of the day-to-day movement side of things. It really helps kind of nourish and nurture those relationships. So we heard from a family actually last week who said, you know what, at this time of year, our teenagers tend to just go up to their bedroom. We hardly ever see them. People just have the TV on, but actually they're getting out there and they're going for a daily walk together and they're having conversations. They're really opening up. We hear all the time, actually, that for a lot of Redders who do enjoy running or walking, the act of being side by side together just really, really builds that connection. People just share so much more. And so that's one of the biggest insights for us, really, is just hearing, actually, this has really helped cemented this friendship. I'm building stronger connections with my family. We heard from a workplace as well who said, you know what, I didn't actually know the name of the person in the department across from me, and now we meet up every lunch and we do a yoga session together. So it's just amazing to see those connections that are building, not just for January, they continue all year round as well.
Well,
And
that's
then
certainly a topic I wanted to come to, about how we make this sustainable. But I think what you've, I think, both reminded of us really clearly is this stuff really matters. But I guess the next thought for all of us is, many of us find this really hard. It doesn't come naturally necessarily to get outdoors. We may be struggling with various things, finding time for movement and so on. And I get the sense, one of the things I love about January is a sense of joy and enthusiasm that comes. And I wondered if we could turn to the community at this point, because I think one of the really interesting things about exercise is not so much the ardor and the kind of challenge of forcing yourself to go to the gym or do some exercise you don't like. It's about finding the form of movement that works for you. So maybe we could ask everyone, again, folks, if you'd like to chip in on the chat, we would all love to hear your thoughts. But what forms of movement do you love that actually bring that sense of joy, that give you a boost? Let's just share a few in the chat and we'll see what comes up. So walking, dance, yoga, roller skating, swimming, football, hiking, ballet, walking with the dogs, Pilates, running, kayaking, distance walking, swimming again, lots of dancing, Tai Chi, badminton, kettleballs. Wow, this is an amazing list. Tennis, climbing into bed. I like that. That sounds very ambitious. Hula hooping, very joyful. Snow tubing, I'm not sure what that is, but that sounds absolutely epic. Surfing, gardening, lovely. Yeah, so a real mix. I mean, lots of similarities, but also real diversity. What are you seeing in that list, Hannah?
Oh, I'm reading it with a massive smile. I think that's the joy of movement, isn't it? It's finding that thing that you really enjoy. And actually, what I love about movement, and Brendon touched upon it earlier, is that it's really shifted throughout the years. I think previously people saw movement more as like gym-based exercises, and you'd need to tie up your lace like your trainers, but actually it's evolved so much more from that. And to see things like gardening and Tai Chi and things like that come up is really encouraging, to know that people are really turning to things that they generally really enjoy and they can sustain as well. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I'd love to go more into those examples of really simple, practical ways, but maybe we should just pause for a moment and actually recognize that not everyone has the same ability to get involved in physical movement. Some of us have limited mobility or sort of certain physical characteristics. I mean, it's harder for us to do that. How do we make this kind of aim to move more as inclusive as it can be?
Teaming up was a really big thing that we've experienced. Actually having the motivation to kind of build your confidence and get out there and enjoy different activities has been a massive thing. Also, nowadays there's so much out there by way of support and networks and communities that are offering incredible content that feels very accessible and it's free and fun. So for example, even with Red January, we have our own activity finder, which when you put in your postcode, you can find free and fun local and accessible activities in your community. So then it's a good way for you to connect with people in your local area and also identify things that you really enjoy doing as well. So there's so many options out there. I appreciate that a lot of the time, some of the feedback we receive is there's so much that it can feel really overwhelming. So our hope is that campaigns like Red can give people the tools that they need to find things that really work for them.
I think you mentioned also, Hannah, there was a website that provided specific advice for people who have limited mobility or have disability and so on, in terms of physical activities. Can you remind us of what that site was? Because that sounded like a really positive resource for people who might need extra support.
Absolutely. So it's Sport England's We Are Undefeatables campaign. They produce incredible content that they do variations on different activities as well. So it's a really good one to look at.
Super, thank you. So that I loved all the things people shared in the chat there. Such a fantastic list, and it's still coming through. I saw flamenco and lots of other fabulous suggestions. So obviously one of the keys to getting moving is to find something you love, but I think generally there's something about the practicality of this that is hard. How do we get past some of the barriers? So I thought, Brendon, maybe what do we know about why we find making movement a regular part of our lives difficult? What are some of the barriers and challenges, and perhaps what are some of the ways we can help coach ourselves or structure our lives to be more likely to move?
Sure, it's one of the strange things, myself included, in terms of we often feel better when we do move, but then sort of getting going when we're not feeling great is really difficult, and that can include motivation or not feeling particularly good. And I think whenever we're trying to do that and trying to ingrain a habit and make something regular, I think it's about, you know, reducing all of the barriers to doing that, as making it as easy as possible. So for me, that's, you know, putting time in the diary. So specifically in the mornings, I know that I'm better in the mornings, I'm going to get more out of it. So I'll diarize time, I'll put my shoes near the door, I'll get my kit out in the morning, all of these types of things which will help address many of those barriers. Because for me, barriers, you know, and what we're seeing a lot of people is I don't have time, you know, I'm too tired, I've got, you know, so much to do. And there's just so many, and motivation is, you know, is a huge one, particularly in the context of you know, not feeling very, you know, good within ourselves. But often if we can break that, then we can really start to feel better within ourselves. So it's about reducing all of these barriers as much as possible, just make it really as easy as possible for us to go and take that particular action. And I really like the conversation around reframing this. It's not necessarily about exercise, which Hannah alluded to, is like, you know, going and doing like a really intense thing. It's about finding that movement you enjoy, and then we're all much more likely to do it, and just taking the pressure off and just go and have fun.
That's a really lovely way of framing it. And Hannah, on that note, I always like hearing ways that people have built sort of movement into their daily life. I remember we were running a course once for young mums, and a mum said, I don't have time to go and exercise, but actually what I do is when I'm walking along with the buggy to get between whatever commitments, I just trying to use that chance as a way of dancing and moving in the park. And it was like, that's brilliant, you built that into your kind of day-to-day journey. I'm sure you've got loads of examples like that, people, you know, walking instead of getting the bus or whatever. What kind of things come up as simple things we can do on a daily basis?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and it's what you're saying there. People in the community are always looking for ways that they can naturally incorporate it into their day-to-day. So one of the things that we often see is people leaving their car at home and walking their kids to school. You touched upon it there, Mark, as well, but even things like getting off the bus to stop earlier and walking to work the rest of the way. We also see people, it tends to be around active travel. So the point around where you can leave your car at home, finding ways to get there on foot, or cycling, for example, as well. The other big thing as well is we do see people, as January goes on, they start to really walk with purpose, to actually start to speed up their walking, and so they can feel their heart rate going up a bit more. So just building up and actually aiming towards a lamppost or something like that, just to start to build in more frequency and more speed as well. Especially for anyone that's looking to build in some running, we do find that can be really helpful. But yeah, just general, it's what Brendon was saying, simple, realistic, fitting things into your lifestyle, fun, keeping it as fun as it can be. We've seen a lot of families recently running to school with their backpacks and having fun along the way and singing and dancing. That's how it should be. That's what makes this stick. So it's been amazing to see the different ways.
You're making me smile just describing that, because that sounds so joyful. Brendon, obviously there were lots of things we can do, you know, indoors. And I remember once a study that showed that if people were reframing their domestic chores around tidying and cleaning and so on, as seeing that as exercise, they actually got more of a physical benefit from it. But I know, or at least you can maybe help us understand this more, but I gather that exercise out in nature, in green space, or, you know, in a natural environment, may be even better for us. Can you say a bit more about that and whether that's true? Oh, you're muted, Brendon, sorry.
Thank you. It had to happen once, didn't it? So it's absolutely true. So just going into nature, in green or blue spaces particularly, or areas where we're getting like the sunlight or the elements put upon us, really has a calming effect on the nervous system, on our brains, and all of the areas which are impacted by our brains and our bodies too. So going out and combining movement in nature has a real calming effect on the nervous system. And doing that around a blue or a green space, you know, it can be sort of local grass area, it could be a park, you know, just grass if you don't have that sort of nearby. It's just really, really powerful. And it's just all of those additional senses that you get, you know, breathing in, you know, the fresh air, you know, getting access to the sunlight and feeling that coming down onto you, or even the rain. I'm a really big fan of actually, you know, slightly bizarrely, of running in the rain. I quite like the challenge. And all of those added benefits of just feeling nature on you, just, you know, compound in a positive way, that feeling of sense of connection with outdoors. And it has a real substantial increased mental health benefit over and above what you would have from exercising indoors. And one great example amongst many is the deep sea swimming, which we've discussed earlier, and it's becoming increasingly popular. That's just one example. Not everyone's going to be a big fan of that, of just using the environment, quite an extreme way to compound the benefits for us. So lots of exciting work to be done on that and the mechanisms.
I'm loving this. I'm already picking up a lot, and both motivation to keep moving and get outdoors more, but also just the kind of practical things. I'd love to come more onto the practical stuff. But Hannah, I think you told me that you'd reached out to your fantastic community, especially the more experienced redders, as you call them, who've been doing this, to ask for any tips they had and might want to share with our audience. What are some of the suggestions you've heard back? Because we're all ears.
Yeah, we were bombarded with advice. A few of the bits that really stood out to us was, there's an incredible redder, Trojan, who's been with us for years now. And I just love the way that he talks about movement. So he talks about it as a gift to himself. I just thought, what a lovely way to position that. It's that thing that he does for himself on a daily basis. I'm sure we're not alone here to say that we're always doing a lot for other people. So the fact that you can carve out that time for yourself to put back into yourself is such a lovely thing. The other thing as well that was shared with us is that goals can shift. They can shift, where they're going to shift for all of us. It depends really where we're at in our lives. A redder, Mandy, was saying that actually, because she's been with Red January for years now, when she first started Red January, she was setting herself a really tough goal of running a marathon at the end of the month. And actually, as the years have gone on, the goal has lessened to some extent and become much more realistic. And actually, she felt guilty because of that. But there's so much strength that comes from recognizing actually starting small and starting realistic and setting a goal that works for you in your life at that point. That's really where we're at, and we shouldn't be putting too much pressure on ourselves. So those are the two bits that really stood out to me and really resonated.
That's great. And I know you've got a list of sort of free resources that we can potentially use. And I think in the email we send out to everyone who's been part of this tomorrow, we'll have that link. But I saw that Jennifer in the chat had just mentioned Parkrun, which of course in the UK and indeed increasingly a wide range of countries now, it's a fabulous community focused sort of local, very accessible running or indeed walking activity. So that's one lovely example. What other kind of things are in that free category of local resources, Hannah?
So we work a lot with local councils, local gyms, local clubs, so running clubs as well. Just on Parkrun, actually, for anyone that is interested, on the last Saturday in January, Parkrun are encouraging people to wear red to celebrate beating the winter blues. It's a lovely way for us all to come together. So for anyone out there that would like to come along and celebrate moving at this time of the year, that's a great way to do it. But on our local activity finder, there's so many resources out there. As I said, we appreciate it can feel quite overwhelming. So to hopefully populate in your postcode, it really kind of sifts out some of the things that might not be of interest to you, and you can potentially find a new sport or hobby that you've been considering for a while and team up with someone in your local community as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Parkrun, and hearing you mentioning red, and of course that's the theme color for your fantastic campaign. But the last time I did a Parkrun, we were all dressed as Santa Claus. It was a Christmas one, and the sight of hundreds of Father Christmases running around a park was particularly joyful. Brendon, I love the example you gave earlier about, if you want to run, and I think you said something like leave your shoes by the door, or something that's going to help you sort of make it a habit. I've heard of this idea, which I love, called habit bundling, which is like, if you want to do, there's something you want to do and there's something you already do, join them together. Like, if you love reading a book or watching a favorite TV show, try and get yourself to do it while you're sitting on the bike in the gym, or linking things. Have you got any, first of all, do you think that's a good habit forming technique? But secondly, have you got any other tips on, especially where the science can help us here, on how to make little adjustments that make it more likely we're going to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really good example, and it is absolutely a good way to go about things. For instance, podcasts are quite common for people to listen to now, or perhaps people will come around listening to this stream happening now, and that would be something that people would ordinarily do. Why not combine this or listening to a podcast, while going out for a walk, or going for doing something else, other type of movement. If you're going to be doing that anyway, and you're able to sort of move and enjoy it, then it's a great way to combine things and make things easy for yourself. And you combine those two activities, and really what that's doing is that's tapping into making that movement meaningful for you, because you're combining things that you enjoy doing, and making it enjoyable. And those are the key recipes which you want to include to make it more fun for yourselves. And about including other aspects, I think it really is just about reframing this as something to have fun. Certainly for me, I could do some grueling exercise maybe for a week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, but it's not going to be very long-term and sustainable. Not many people like the thought of starting or maintaining some exercise where they may thrash themselves, and that could be different for different people. But if I reframe this as something small, achievable, and something I can build on, means something to me, then it's much more likely to start and also build up from there and make it realistic for myself too. And definitely bringing in that fun element, because if you get me doing something where I feel like I'm not able to do it, or it's not good fun, then I'm not going to be going back. So combining all of those things and try new things, experiment. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is I'm not very good at dancing, but I'm really enjoying dancing at the moment, terribly, and it's making me smile when I'm not always feeling good. So I'm not afraid to look foolish, and that's okay.
Brilliant. Hannah, on this point about sustainability, I mean, obviously you're running a January campaign, perfect time of year to get us all moving, to set an intention for the year. You've obviously been doing this for multiple years. How have you managed to make it last for you? But also, what have you seen in the community of people who start something at the start of the year, but then manage to find ways of making it last?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we've seen is people continuing to set goals. So one of the things actually we started doing last year is in-person meetups. So we were meeting out in the Peak District, getting everyone together for a walk outdoors in nature, again, opening up that communication channel as well. So it's been amazing to see people continue to set goals. The other thing for me, and Brendon touched upon it there on a personal level, is being really realistic and not putting too much pressure on myself. There's going to be times where, yes, you're very busy, or you just don't really have much motivation to get outdoors, especially when it's raining and things like that. So it's just really not putting too much pressure on yourself. And actually, I remember when I first started Red January, I was a really keen runner, and I used to run with a watch a lot, and I was always about running for a PB, and those were my drivers. And as maybe it's age, I don't know, but as time has gone on, those goals have shifted massively. And now I really celebrate going for a walk. It doesn't matter how long I'm walking for or what pace. It's all around getting outdoors and getting some fresh air. It's a good place to be with movement. And it's not always, my motivation levels aren't always as high every day. But actually to have that Red community, to get inspiration from them as well, to mix things up. I know I talked earlier about cold water swimming. I did give it a go. And it was joyful. It was good fun. So yeah, I'm trying to encourage people to mix things up. I found the benefits of that hugely.
That's brilliant. I'd love to, well, in a moment, we're going to come to questions from this fantastic audience, and it's been great to see all the chat in the community. So if you've got a question for Hannah and or Brendon, please do use the Q&A function, and you'll see we have the ability to vote up each other's questions. So if you see another question you'd love to hear answered, please do give that a thumbs up. But before we go there, let's just do a little bit more on goal setting. Now, I've got a ridiculous life goal, which at one level shouldn't work at all because it feels completely unachievable and bonkers, but actually does actually work for me. So my life goal is to cycle to the moon before I die. And the moon is a ridiculous distance, like 380,000 kilometers away. But I'm a super keen cyclist and I cycle loads. And I've worked out that my current pace with a little bit of tailing off means I'll get to the moon about age 82, if I'm lucky, which my wife said, oh my goodness, I can't believe you're still going to be wearing that stupid lycra when you're in your 80s, which may or may not happen. So we'll see. But for me, it's like on a rainy day or a day when I'm not feeling like I want to get out on my bike, it's just a little reminder of, no, I want to get to the moon before I die. And the kids think it's quite funny and it's just a little bit ludicrous. But for me, that kind of works. It's a super, it's multi-decade, quite probably unachievable aim, but I find that motivating. Now, I don't think that works for everyone, but I'd love to ask, first of all, Brendon, your tips on goal setting, and then maybe we could come to the whole audience and ask people to maybe think about what goals we're going to set ourselves. Brendon, how do we do it well?
Sure, I love that example, Mark. And I think it's great to have what you said, like a long-term goal, but to help us know that that is achievable, what the sort of literature and evidence shows is that we need multiple goals along the way, which we can achieve and give us that momentum, like the domino effect in terms of achieving that, getting to the moon. So that could just be, getting to the next, village or town on your bike. And then if you do that, this next week, then you're much more likely to get to the moon in however long that could take. So setting small realistic goals in the first instance is really good. And then when you start to achieve some of those, it could be trying out a new activity. It could be, going for a bit of a further walk. It could be, exercising and moving 5 minutes longer. Then once you start to, break, through these goals, it just gives yourself much more confidence and that feeling of, self-efficacy. And yes, I can do this. I've achieved something. And that just reinforces this compounding, machine of being able to get to the moon. So I think big goals are great, but also goals we can action on a daily basis are really helpful too. And it could include like, weekly goals, monthly goals. And the key thing about goals is, if we don't achieve a goal in a set time, we can't be too hard on ourselves, because if we're sort of self-punishing around this, I'm never going to make this goal, then we're not going to get back up and going. They're good guides, but it's important. If we don't reach one, don't be too hard on yourself. Just have a bit of fun and get up and go again.
Brilliant advice. And in a moment, Hannah, I'd love to hear what your goal is, because I know you've been doing this for a few years now, but let's actually ask everyone that question. So everyone in the community, again, if you'd like to chip in, what's your movement goal, particularly for the rest of January, this fantastic Red January campaign? What would you like to do more of movement-wise? What do you love to do? What has this conversation inspired you to do? Let's just share a few ideas. So I'm seeing dance more, get off the sofa, consistency, walks and exercise, trying out some running, 10,000 steps every day, get up earlier, running outside, dancing more, try a personal trainer, doing a certain amount of exercise each day, more natural movement, more walking, recover from COVID, like a really great health goal. These are flying past so far I can hardly see them, but swimming, Pilates, just getting out of the house every day, maybe join a gym, daily stretching, some fantastic ideas in here. But what I particularly love about them is they feel really personalized, which I think is building on all the great advice you've said. So, Hannah, what are you spotting in that list? Anything resonating for you there?
It's really encouraging to see such realistic goals as well. And like you said, it does feel very personal to the individual and what stage they're at in life. No, it's really good to see that people are looking to set something small that they could hopefully start tomorrow as well, which is good.
Well, one thing we can all do is sign up to join the Red January campaign, which I've done myself, and I'm already now linked into the Strava that tracks my cycling and all the rest of it. But Hannah, what's your own movement goal for January? What have you decided to do that's going to give you a boost this month?
So I've decided, I guess because teams is at the heart, the community, sorry, is at the heart of Red January. I am buddying up with a different Redder and joining them for their activity. I love to see the impact that their own chosen activity has on them. And actually, it's quite nice, as I said earlier, just to mix up your activities. Some of them I'm a complete beginner at as well, which I'm a huge advocate for. It feels quite childlike. There's a few things that I haven't done since I was at school, so that should be good fun.
Yeah, it's great. When you look back at the 10 keys to happier living, which many know is our framework of things that support well-being, actually what you've just said there supports so many of them, because it's about relationships with each other, it's about trying new things, it's about having a sense of goals, it's about having a sense of purpose and being part of something bigger, it's the physical activity, it's the mental sort of mindfulness of being in the moment, doing something, it's like looking for what's good because you're kind of really grateful for the time outdoors. So you're ticking off a lot of great well-being stuff in a pretty simple, free to all activity, which is really inspiring. But why don't let's go a step further with the community. So listening to what you said, Brendon, but also just thinking about good goal setting and action setting, let's all try and picture what is the first step towards that goal you set yourself. So if it is, walking more, what are you going to do to make sure that's going to happen tomorrow? I saw people talking about Pilates and swimming and so on. So let's just go back to the community again. What's the next really tiny step you can take towards that goal? Maybe it's contacting a friend or getting your swimming kit out or whatever. So if anyone would like to share that, what are you going to actually do as a next step? So booking online, that's great. Scheduling the time, checking the bike over, top tip, that is set a specific time, put my trainers by the front door, timetable, tell someone, yeah, fantastic. Put it on the calendar. This is great. So you're making it really practical. What else can we do, Brendon? What this looks like there's some really wise action here from the community? How can we really make it more likely we'll do it?
Hannah's got a really good example there, and I think that's applicable for all of us. Whether it be going to go and try and find a friend, and it brings that sense of community. You know, you may or may not want to go with other people, but saying, you know, you may go meet a friend for a coffee or something else, say, hey, why don't we go for a walk, or why don't we do X, Y, Z while we're moving too? And I think that's a really nice way to make it enjoyable, because you're talking and you're getting that social connectedness with someone, particularly if you go outdoors. But then also you're giving that sort of increased accountability and supporting each other. So I think that's a really nice example of, you know, connecting the dots to people, if you just, you know, could say that. And also, you know, other things such as, you know, pets, or, you know, just sort of making that commitment to yourself each day. And one of the things that I'm personally sort of doing for me, in addition to some other stuff, is going outside and getting fresh air, and leaving my phone at home. And just the clarity around the sort of thought and being present is just lovely.
Very wise, thank you. And thank you to everyone in the chat for those fantastic suggestions. I think we've got a really good habit forming thing going on here. But let's come to questions. So thank you, Brendon and Hannah, for lots of wisdom shared, and hopefully people can take away some very practical sort of actions and tips. So we've had some great questions here. So Alison has said, I think most of us are well aware of the benefits of exercise on mental health, but as someone who struggles with not only mental health problems, but also mobility and energy problems, as well as feeling as though I can't be bothered to do anything, what tips do you have to help kind of get that motivation when, I guess, when you're feeling low, is what we're hearing from Alison here? What would you say to that?
So I think the key thing is when you're feeling low is just really dialing in the expectations. So when I've had that for numerous times is, you know, thought of going back to doing what I was doing when I was feeling, you know, absolutely great or normal for me was just too much. So just starting again small and being kind to myself. You know, if I couldn't go and, you know, do X, Y, and Z, just getting back into that habit was really, really important for me, and not putting up barriers and saying I'm never going to get back to X, Y, Z. And I think if you are having issues with energy and envelopes and peaks and troughs, as many people will experience, is finding a time in a day when it may be suitable and beneficial for you, and not pushing yourself too hard within those periods of expending energy, because then you just be really tired afterwards, and you want to just conserve your energy throughout the day. So, you know, be kind to yourself, find a time of day which is good for you, and don't push yourself too hard. Just get back into the habit, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that sort of self-care and sort of being kind to yourself is a form of nourishment to your physical and mental health, as well as the movement itself. Very wise. Gillian's asked a question, Hannah, which I think you've partially answered already, but I think it'd be really good to be clear on this. Are we able to find people in our own areas easily that are doing the Red January challenge? And if so, how?
Yes, there's a couple of ways actually. So you can either join our online community channels, and we find actually, especially in the closed Facebook group, people tend to share the area that they're based in and the local running club or walking club or activity club that they go to. So it could be a really good opportunity to buddy up with someone local. Equally, in the activity finder as well, there's quite a lot of people. It is predominantly in the UK, I should say that, but there might be people outside of the UK that are also flying the flag for red, hopefully wearing red as well. So you should spot them from a mile off. But hopefully there's opportunities in your local community when you join local clubs and things like that.
Great. Now, we've talked about accessibility, both in terms of finding things, but also in terms of if you have limited mobility and so on. But one thing we haven't mentioned is pain. And Charmaine's asked, I think, a really important question. Brendon, what can you recommend for people who have pain when they move, or with various types of movement?
Well, it's a great question, and it's one of the main reasons I see people as a physiotherapist is because people are struggling with pain, mobility limitations, or other types of factors which influence their ability to go. So the strange thing about pain and movement is that we start to feel better in terms of pain when we start moving. It's going to feel a bit uncomfortable at first, but an abundance of evidence says that as long as we're not pushing ourselves excessively, that just, you know, going, you know, feeling a slight bit of pain and discomfort, if we just build up the movement that we're doing and we break what's known as this fear avoidance, then we can slowly ease into and start to feel better from pain. As we start moving, pain symptoms improve. And actually, the frontline recommended treatment for pain symptoms, including people with chronic pain, which I did my PhD in, is to help people to not be afraid of moving and also reframe it. And people feel better as a result of their pain symptoms and the interference has in their activities of daily living. So do not be too afraid, particularly if no one's told you there's anything really catastrophic at the end of it. Just try a small amount of movement and build up.
And would you suggest on that note that people do reach out for professional support from physiotherapists and others if they're experiencing sort of ongoing pain and issues around movement?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're experiencing ongoing pain, you have the onset of a new type of pain which is bothering you and interfering with your life, please do go and see someone. You can go and see your GP or another frontline pain specialist, such as a physiotherapist or somebody else, and they'll be able to help ease you about what that could be maybe related to, and that'd be a good starting point for you.
Yeah, I was knocked off my bike and broke a rib a little while ago and had physiotherapists that really helped with that. And my wife's an osteopath and sees a lot of people who have sort of sport and movement related challenges, and it's really empowering to see how much people can sort of take control of those and find ways forward. Somebody called V, whose name I can't see in full, has just asked a really good question about what about people who are on their feet 12 plus hours a day at work? Do the same benefits apply? Would a walk be as beneficial for someone who's already done a 12-hour active shift as someone who's in a more sedentary job? Love to hear your thoughts on that, Hannah. I mean, I guess it's partly the physical movement, but it's also partly the other stuff, the outdoors, the people, change of scene, and so on. What do you think?
Exactly that. Yeah, that question does come up quite a lot, actually. And we do encourage that people listen to their bodies and rest. Rest is so crucial too. But your point there, it really is the other benefits that come with it. So if you have been, especially because you're in that workspace as well, actually getting out there and going for a short walk with a friend where you can either get work off your chest or talk about other things as well and have a bit of a giggle about something else that's going on, that can really help boost your well-being as well.
I can just add on to that, if you've finished, Hannah, just that in terms of like more broadly the evidence. So there is a difference in terms of the context within which we move. So if we look at leisure time physical activity, outside of work, we tend to see better protective and positive effects on our mental health than if we see that in the context of work. And there's quite an abundance of literature within that, and it's all to do with the context within which we're moving. Still benefits, but much more so outside of that. But really do listen to your body as well.
Love that. Thank you. And I'm also loving some of the chat here about litter picking as a form of movement and activity, something I find myself doing when I'm out walking the dog down by the river, because it breaks my heart seeing litter, and I get a particular boost out of not only being down by the river with the dog, but also just like feeling like I've made the environment slightly nicer just by picking up things and putting them in a bin. It's a kind of like back to that point about contributing and caring and being kind is also good for our well-being, and that's something I think you see whenever you do things in a community setting. And on that sort of theme of community and helping others, I love Lorna's question here, because of course what we have in our community, and I'm sure you see in red as well, Hannah, is a desire to help and support others as well as look after ourselves. And Lorna's just asked, how can we help others who struggle with low motivation?
That's such a lovely question. We do find actually on the Facebook closed community, for anyone that is struggling perhaps to get out of bed or to leave the house or to move that day, we see other redders doing their activity on their behalf as a way to show that we're all in this together. There's going to be times where we do experience low mood, and we find knowing that someone's been so kind enough to get out there and do something can help boost you the next day to get outdoors. So that community aspect is so key around that, around kind of boosting your motivation to move. So we'd suggest, again, just joining any kind of Action for Happiness is a great one, of course, but joining an online community and really just sharing, being brave to share where you're at. And you'll find that you're not alone with your thoughts as well.
We're definitely not alone, but actually the next question is an interesting sort of counterpoint to that. So they've just said, I find that when my friend's available, we go out for really long walks, but when she's not available, I just use that as an excuse to take it easy. How can I get out of that mindset of relying on others to motivate us to move? So community is great, but when the community is not there, can we find it within ourselves, I guess?
Yes, great question. And if we look at this on a motivational framework, is this sort of like friend idea or community is really this external motivation. And the idea is that if we look at this in like a self-determination theory framework, for instance, is we're looking at external motivation. And then as we over time experience the benefits which we're talking about here, in terms of having this external motivation, and we realize we can do it, we set a goal, we go have a positive experience, and we start to move towards internal motivation. And that will be, I'm going to go out for a longer walk today because I feel better when I do it. And it's less reliant upon this external motivation from someone. It's absolutely fine to acknowledge that external motivation is important. It's why we all do a lot of things. But over time, that external motivation, as we have positive experiences, swings to internal motivation. And I think it's just being patient and acknowledging that that's okay. And it'll take time. And then you can start to, wait for that moment when you start to want to do it for yourself and for your time.
Yeah, I love that distinction, that sort of intrinsic desire to do something. Chris has asked, I think, a very common sort of challenge and question, especially right now. There are so many people dealing with really challenging situations across our country and around the world with, various sort of work and life pressures. Chris has said, full-time work and young family adds up to a real time shortage. I'm busy from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. and then I'm tired. How do I make time for movement?
Well, I can say a little bit of my personal experience, and what I do is, I often find difficult to get time myself, but I've found through more difficult experiences that if I don't create time for myself to look after myself and provide self-care, then I start to suffer or not have very good consequences. So for me, it just has to come first and foremost, within my daily structure and life across the course of the week. Because if I don't, I start to suffer. And it's only through life being a bit uncomfortable that I've learned that hard truth for myself. So it's kind of flipping it about, this is not really a nice to have for me. This is something which needs to be core and diarized in my life. It's just as important as eating for me. If I don't eat for a period of time, then I start to feel rubbish. If I don't have that me time where I'm going out and moving, I also start to feel rubbish. So I make time to eat and I make time to move.
That's a really interesting point. And Hannah, I'd love to come to you in a second on this, but I think one of the main reasons I get out on my bike consistently is because having done that for a bit and realized how much it helps me feel better, when I've had this periods where I've been ill or busy and I haven't done it, I do notice that I sleep worse, I don't feel as good. And it's actually that recognition of, wow, I actually don't feel as good, is a really good motivator to get it back out and do it again. And so yeah, Hannah, anything you wanted to add on that question?
Yeah, I echo everything that you've both said. It's a core prioritizing health is a core component of my life now. Without that, everything else just goes a little bit awry. I come to things not in a very kind of calm way. I'm not able to make as kind of considered decisions. Sleep gets impacted, my nutrition gets impacted, the whole thing. So it's a real staple. I would say as well, obviously we've all experienced when you're absolutely knackered after work, the prospect of tying up later, all of that stuff can just feel really overwhelming. So I tend to leave work, I'll plug in, I'll either listen to a podcast, trying to kind of distance myself from work whilst walking, or I'll call a loved one as well and actually just having a chat, not about work, but about other things, and walking along. You find that I was planning the other day on walking for like 10 minutes around the block. I found that I'd done so many laps around the block. I'd probably done miles, but when you're in the conversation, time just flies by.
That's so interesting. I hadn't really thought of that before, but I've last weekend I had one call with an old friend from home, and then I had another call with an old friend while I happened to be out walking, and I walked for much further than I would have done. And it was a really brilliant conversation. And actually that was kind of like free movement. Well, I wasn't even thinking about it as movement. It was just a lovely chat. But actually it's another example of that sort of habit stacking or habit bundling, isn't it? Where you have a conversation and you're just being a bit active at the same time. That's a great, simple suggestion. On a related note, Sadness just said, I can't motivate myself to go out after work in the dark, wet evenings. So there's a particular challenge at this time of year, but I do love walking. I just don't know how to break this block in my mind and get out of the door to face the cold. Any particular practical suggestions on that one? The bleak English winter problem?
If it's helpful to know, I've joined, and obviously if running's not your thing, there'll be other things out there as well, but I've joined my local running club. That can really help. You know, you've got that time where you need to be there. I told someone in the club that I'm going to be there, so you've got that accountability as well. Equally, there will be times, and I don't know if you feel this, Brendon, but there's times where you just don't want to get outdoors, and that's okay too. And we have loads of things out there where you can enjoy movement from the comfort of your home. We've seen redders over the past few days doing things like running up and down their stairs. That's a huge workout. There's lots of things that you can enjoy from the comfort of your home as well. But I do find buddying up, having that thing that's holding me accountable, joining a local community club can be really helpful.
I also appreciate the advice from Mary in the chat here. It says, put on layers, which reminds me of the thing that cyclists say, which is there's no such thing as bad weather, just wrong clothing. So I think if I put enough layers on, then I can get through almost anything. Brendon, what's your tip for getting out even when it's dark and cold?
Make it easy for myself. I'll diarise time when I don't feel like it, and I'll just reduce any of the resistance. So I'll make sure I have a lunch break and I'll go out for a walk, or I'll diarise it in the morning, and not put too much of a bigger expectation on myself. If I know a time is particularly difficult, then I'll avoid that particular time and just go again at a different time, and I'll combine it with other activities. I mean, I waste so much time during the day, and I think I'm often very busy, whether it be looking at social media or doing, other things. And if I just reduce, that by 15, 20 minutes, all of a sudden I've got 15, 20-minute gap, and I found that as a helpful way.
Well, from the outdoors to the indoors, here we all are sat on Zoom, wherever we are in the world right now. And Judy's asked, a lot of us sit at our computers during the day. Can you suggest any exercise to help us during the day? Now, that may not be able to be going outdoors and so on. What can we do at our desks or in a kind of, day-to-day working environment?
So one of the things that I do personally is just getting up and walking around at least every hour. So if I'm sitting down, I'll walk up to the bathroom or walk up and down the stairs. So I'm constantly moving. And sometimes it will be just a case of, balancing on one leg. So I'm sort of stimulating my balance systems, putting the pressure through one leg, or just doing some squats on the spot just to increase the circulation, get the blood flowing and keep the brain intact, help with the concentration centers. It helps me.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. My daughter's at home revising for her mock GCSEs at the moment, and I keep encouraging her to get up and just move around and not just sit down. And actually, Brendon, while we're talking, you mentioned at the start the work you've done with people dealing with sort of various mental health challenges, and I feel it would be remiss to not sort of go into that a bit more detail. There are lots of people in this community who either have lived experience of mental health challenges or know loved ones who are dealing with it. All of this advice, I think, is applicable to people regardless of their current mental state, but I think particularly if you're dealing with a complex sort of mental health challenge, that it might make some of these steps even harder to do. What's your experience of working with people who are dealing with quite severe mental health challenges, and how have you been able to help them?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. Complex mental health challenges and symptoms of those, schizophrenia, personality disorders, PTSD, can make movement really, really hard. So when I'm working with someone, who is so unwell, they're typically in a hospital, I'll just create a really safe environment and do many of the things which we talked about today. So I'll start off really small. I'll often talk to people, make it social, and just really sort of connect with the individual. So they almost realize in quite a sneaky way that they're not actually moving and exercising. So we'll go for a walk and we'll build up a bit of a rapport, and have a bit of fun. And it can be really difficult for people just to get going, but it's just really reassuring people that just doing these small amounts can really help you. And I think that's one of the privileges that I have in terms of going in to help people who are really struggling, so much so they're in a hospital, to help them just to sort of really start to break some of those habits, and just sort of really try and crack through to experience the benefits of moving. So just getting alongside people is just, what I have the privilege of doing.
Lovely. Well, it's really inspiring to hear that you're doing that work, and it's great to see such a strong connection between movement and mental health in the broadest sense. So it's great work. Hannah, we're running out of time, and we've got this great audience here, and I know we've already told the whole Action for Happiness community about Red January, and I think you said that many thousands have sort of clicked through to sign up. But could you remind us how we get involved, and perhaps even remind us why it's beneficial to to not just move by ourselves, but be part of something like Red January and what people will get when they get involved.
Absolutely. So you can still sign up for free at join.redjanuary.com. And I'm incredibly biased to say this, but generally the online Red community is so special and supportive. A lot of Redders have been with us for years now. So they've been through the motions and they've put kind of realistic and small goals in place. So they'll have lots of advice and support. There's so much inspiration out there. So please come along and join. You'll have hopefully an incredible experience and hopefully start to form habits that will support you all year round as well.
That's brilliant. So tomorrow we'll send around an email which will have a link to this video, to the chat, and all the fantastic things that people have been sharing with each other. So thank you everyone for getting so involved in this. And that will also include links to Red January, some of the free resources, how to find activities near you, and other things that Hannah has mentioned. So in a moment, I'd love to thank everyone for being here. But before I do that, I just wondered if we could just turn back to each of you just for a final thought, really. It's been a fabulous conversation together, and I feel like I've learned so much, and there's been such a wide range of insights and thoughts. Brendon, what thought would you like to leave us with as we part today?
My final thought to leave would be go and enjoy movement, and just go and try and be happy. That's the main thing, is I'm going to keep doing every day, is just try and be happy. That's my goal for every day, and just to incorporate that with movement. So go and have fun. That's what my main message is.
Thank you. I've certainly felt the joy from you both in this conversation. Hannah, what's your final thought?
Exactly what Brendon was saying around starting small and realistic. But for me, it's really around building the relationships that you have in your life. It's such a great opportunity through movement to really nurture the friendships, your family, your colleagues. So use it as an opportunity to really get to know each other a bit better and enjoy walking alongside each other. It's incredible. And before you know it, you've walked for miles.
Well, we're all walking alongside each other in this journey called life. And what you're doing with Red January and this amazing science of movement and mental health is really making a difference to so many people. So thank you to everyone who's been part of this event, for all the fantastic comments in the chat, the great questions, but particularly on behalf of everyone here, thank you, Brendon, and thank you, Hannah, for giving your time to this and for everything you're doing. And I'm looking forward to seeing and being personally involved with Red January and seeing many more in the community get involved. So thank you all. Keep up the great work. And what a lovely way of getting a difficult time of year for many of us off to a really inspiring and joyful start. Thank you.